Take every second of every day, not to take it for granted, because it can be taken from you so quick.
Most mobile homes don't last long in a fire. I was surprised that the house was still standing as much as it was.
Fire was coming out the front door and all the windows, and then heavy smoke coming out of the bedrooms. And at some point, someone said, hey, we're missing 3 people, a male, a female, and a child. I never expected anybody to make it out of that. I fully expected to find 3 bodies.
Got in my car, flew up there, and I saw something that was just unimaginable. You could see every vessel. He had no skin. I wanted to hold him, but I couldn't. Just to wrap my arms.
Your epidermis is pretty much a protective layer on your body. So if your skin's gone, infection's gonna set in.
He was in so much pain and screaming. He wasn't gonna last long if we didn't hurry up and get him out of there.
The North Caddo ambulance arrived on scene. We started dressing the child's burns with sterile dressing.
They had to get him stabilized through his breathing and get his heart rate and all, and then wrap him up like a mummy, because I couldn't see nothing but his lips and his eyes.
Everybody immediately knew with burns that severe that the child needed to be in the burn unit at LSU as quickly as possible.
If you need a helicopter, you call for a helicopter. And I needed one that night bad.
We pretty much have the same capabilities as a ground ambulance. We just have speed. We can usually cut the ground time, whatever the ground time would be, we'll kind of cut that in half, just as a general rule of thumb. We landed, we knew we had to get that airway secured, but we also wanted to get him pain-free.
It was just like, do what you gotta do to keep my baby alive. And knowing in the back of my mind that my daughter was already gone. And I watched him push my baby, put him in there, and I watched him take him up, and away.
Fortunately, the flight is only about 15 minutes from Vivian to LSU. And once we land at the hospital, it's wonderful just to come down off that elevator and come around the corner and see the hallway lined up with those people, and they're ready to take over. The emotions hit a lot of times after the run's over. You step out of the emergency room and you realize what just took place.
Far as I could go was the doors, and they said, Mama, you can't go. We got to do what we can to keep him alive for you.
Basically, the life-threatening concern that everyone had was 58% of his body was damaged from flame burns. But more importantly, with the house fire, not only the smoke, but the toxic chemicals that are given off during that time period can cause significant lung problems.
He had very bad infections on and off because of his burns, and so we had to take care of him very closely. He was almost a one-on-one patient when he came in, one nurse taking care of just him because he was so busy for a while.
In the hospital, when he, got good and alert and they weaned him off some of his medicine, I told my sister, I said, I gotta tell him that his mother is gone. And she said, you can't do that. And I said, I got to. And when I told him, he looked. And it's like he was calm. And to see the strength and the courage coming from a 4-year-old child, it's just divine.
When we look at burns and we're calculating out body surface area injured, what we're focusing in on as well is what part of the body's not burned, because that's your skin bank. That's where you're going to get your skin from in order to resurface the areas that are injured.
Throughout all of the procedures, he would always smile. Always. And it just would break my heart. And I would just walk out the room and go, how can he smile like that? Because I'm breaking inside for him. And yet he did every time.
They wasn't people just working there for a job. They became my family.
You know, some days she would just walk in and she would be crying, and one of us, any of us, would just give her a hug.
We have the emotional commitment to not only healing their bodies, but taking it a step forward to try to heal everybody's spirit and soul as well.
And we were able to wean him down off the ventilator to where he just had what we call a trach collar, which has like humidified air or humidified oxygen going to his tracheostomy.
Not being able to speak is a huge component for a child, not to be able to communicate and make their wishes known.
I wanted to understand him every time, but every time I couldn't. I had to grow into it. How we communicated was through moods, his eyes, body language, and writing.
We had several trips to the operating room dealing with his respiratory status because attempts at extubating him were unsuccessful due to the fact that he developed the scarring that became so critical and the reason that he needed to keep his tracheostomy when he left.
We did not think that Zep would ever talk again, that he would have to have his trach for life because of the scarring.
There was times I just want to just quit. But I can't. Because if I did, then he would.
His treatment for the burns had been successfully completed. The only thing remaining was his airway, and his airway had not been treated successfully up to that point.
Zep dealt with the disappointing surgeries in the very beginning very well because I don't think he really had any expectations as a 10-year-old to what the outcome was going to be.
They didn't give up. LSU didn't give up. One fails, they had something else in place. Mama, we're going to try this, but we got to have your consent. Whatever need, go for it.
I realized that they had almost exhausted all their hope, all their efforts treating this condition.
He got my baby comfortable, to have a relationship first. He didn't just push it in, he walked it in.
My first impressions of his airway were, this is a very difficult airway case. About a couple millimeters below his vocal cords, the airway basically ended up in a small blind sac. And there was no connection to the lungs from that point on. Either this would succeed or he would have to live with the trach for the rest of his life.
The last time I heard his voice before this happened was 6 hours before the tragic.
The risks I take as a surgeon are nothing compared to the risks that the child and the family are taking. They're risking basically their lives for this.
And they would always tell me, well, it's risk. He could die, or bleed to death, and all that. But I said, God didn't keep him for him to die, but for to live.
Your first goal is to wake him up and transfer him to the intensive care unit as stable as possible. But whether or not what you did will work will be answered in 3 weeks, when all the stents are out, when the tubes are out, and when he starts breathing on his own.
I guess because by me going through it so much, that gave me the strength for when that day came to expect it.
The tube came out very easily. He coughed a couple times and started breathing on his own. Initially mildly labored, then better and better. And I saw that he had fun. He was happy. Initially we focused on just breathing. And once his breathing was stable, he was very tired. I left him. But later on, the nurses told me that he started voicing his first words.
They came out and told me, it's out. And he was crying for me. And when I walked in,
at first I didn't know I could talk, so I just said that I loved it. That I loved it, my granny, when she first came in. They were my first words.
6 years. His first words to me, I love you. 6 long years. It seemed it to be 6,000, 6 million. But to hear those words made it worth it.
He was so happy and just back to being a normal kid, you know. He could actually conversate with people when he wanted to. He didn't have to use extra hand gestures or anything like that.
I can finally get to say what I want to say, and I can finally talk to my friends. I can run now. I can do a lot of more stuff now.
That's the moment doctors live for. That's the affirmation of everything that you have done right up to that moment, and that is the biggest joy one can have.
The first time I saw him again, we immediately just walked up to each other, and like all of us kind of converged together and just gave each other a hug around him. We just all hugged. That's all we could do, because he had been through so much. So much.
Sometimes I forget that I could talk, because I have been right so many times that I have forgot that I could talk again. And I started talking a lot.
He's very chatty, which is good, you know. I hope he talks my head off. I don't mind it at all.
You could sort of tell when he felt a little better, he became a little bit more talkative, and he knew it was almost time to go home. So, yeah, of course, you always see that coming. You hate to see him go, but you're happy to see him go at the same time.
I'm very hopeful that Zep will lead a normal life without any airway stents or procedures in the long term.
He always said that we have heart, and that's what he would tell us before he was able to speak this time. And I think that's so true about LSU. We do all have heart.
From the ambulance people to the doctors and the nurses. God knew that was going to happen in my life, so he already had a place for us to come to get the healing that we would need and a life restored.
I appreciate what they did for me, and I thank them for what they did, and I thank them for saving my life.